I don't remember which teaching number this is now. This is 10? Okay, thank you. And we're going to pick up from last time with the next word in the Greek to look at, in the Hebrew, and it's nephesh. We've talked about it before, but we're going to look at some specific scriptures. This is Strong's number 5315, and it means a soul self, an appetite, a breathing creature. So to narrow it down, let's just call it your soul. Your soul. Nephesh, your soul. Genesis chapter 1, verse 20, it talks about the living creature. It's literally the living souls, every living soul. And let me turn there real quick in my computer program here and look at the words. So in the NESB it says, then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. The word living is Strong's number 2416, which means creatures that have the spirit of life in them. Living things. That's the same word that means living for anything, whether it's a plant or an animal. But then it says living creatures. The word creatures is 5315. It literally means souls. So now it's narrowing it down. It's not talking about plant life. It's talking about animal life, because only animal life has a soul. Plants don't. Only animal life has a soul. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, it tells us man became a living soul. So when God created mankind, man became a living soul. Listen, brethren, this quickly disproves people that teach that man is pre-existent. There's people that teach in certain churches that teach that man is already alive as a soul, a living soul, swimming around or flying around God's head. I kid you not. That's what they say. But this quickly disproves that. When Adam was created, it says now man has now become a living soul. In other words, he wasn't a living soul before. Is anyone just a little bit chilly? I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. Hang on. Those of you on YouTube, bear with us. Okay, I'm back. Man became a living soul. When? When he was created in the Garden of Eden. He was not a pre-existent living soul flying around God's head crying out, send me, as one brother put it. I've dubbed that soul flies. There is no such thing as soul flies. The Bible is very clear. Man became a living soul when he was created. We become living souls when we're conceived. You see, Adam was conceived out of the dust of the ground from the Garden of Eden. We're conceived in our mother's womb, but still from matter that is from this earth. This is one that causes a lot of controversy to a lot of people. Genesis chapter 9, let me turn there, verse 4. Oh boy, here we go. Only you shall not eat flesh. Now God is telling what they can and cannot eat. You shall not eat flesh with its life. That is, the word life there is nephesh. You shall not eat flesh with its soul. Its blood, it says. So in the NASB it says, only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. In the Hebrew, it's only you shall not eat flesh with its soul, its blood. So we see the Watchtower Society, which says that you can't take a transfusion because it's someone else's soul. Well, listen, you're not going to drain their soul by getting a transfusion. Neither, if you are bleeding really bad, do you lose your soul. You know, oh, I had a bad accident. I lost half my soul. It's going to take a year to grow back. No, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Your soul's not diminished by the loss of blood. Neither can you gain someone else's soul by taking a transfusion, which they always filter anyways, you know, to give you the parts of blood that you need. But what does this mean? Well, here's something that I suspect, and that's this. There are many scriptures that we've read for years and thought, okay, this is just speaking metaphorically, or this is speaking typologically, or this is a hyperbole. It's not literal. This is a spiritual saying. It isn't a literal saying. And then we found out, no, we were wrong. It was literal. So in all the prophecies, which there are many, 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 that spoke of the restoration of Israel as a nation, as a people, with their own language. And we spiritualized that away until literal Israel came back into being. Restored with the language as a people and very powerful in the last days. And then we realized, oh no, that was literal. It wasn't spiritual. So here, it tells us clearly, only you shall not eat flesh with its life or its soul. And then it explains that statement. It says, its blood. That's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot. So, you know, one scientist in particular, but I know there are many, because this is from a study, that know this, that you are contained in your brain through the right temporal lobe of the brain, and they know that. One person talked about it as a silver cord he saw coming out of that part of his head, of his flesh, to a body that was standing there that was shining. In other words, that was his spiritual body, okay? That is his Ruka, 7307, his spiritual body. Now he's standing there thinking because his soul is attached to his body, or what he has become. He's looking back at his flesh, his physical body, laying there in the hospital bed, and a silver cord of his spiritual body, silver energy, coming from the right temporal lobe of his head to the bottom of his ghostly or spiritual form, okay? King David wrote a psalm, one of his songs, that talks about that very thing and says, you hold me with the silver cord. How did he know that? How did David know that? And he's talking about, you hold me on this earth with this silver cord. There is a silver cord attached to the right temporal lobe of your brain. That's why if you are wounded badly there, you die. But if you are wounded badly over here, you can live quite often. Isn't that amazing? But if you are here, that cord's cut and you're kicked out of your body. Now, it tells us that the flesh with its life or its soul is its blood. Is that a literal statement or a metaphorical statement? What's that? Do you think it's metaphorical? Do you think it's literal? I have a feeling it's literal. If the right temporal lobe of your brain holds your spirit to your flesh, why couldn't your blood hold your soul? It doesn't mean that you're going to sin with a blood transfusion. It doesn't mean that you're going to sin or the loss of blood, you're going to diminish your soul. But if all your blood pours out, I guarantee you, your soul will not be in that body. But neither will your spirit, because your body will cease to function, and you'll be kicked out of your body. But is a person's soul in their blood? I think if we could talk to a geneticist, I think we would find that the genetic properties that help make up or form our personalities are carried in our blood. It's all carried in our blood. And it helps make up who we are. And so this statement, I think, I agree with the sister, it's literal. I think a person's soul is in their blood. Can I prove that? Well, all I know is this. It literally says that in the Bible. Your soul is in your blood. Well, they translate it life. Does the word also mean life? But yeah, but without your soul, you're not going to be alive. It's really one and the same. Like I said before, these words are interchangeable a lot of times. But the main function of this word is soul. A soul self, an appetite. Isn't everything that you take part of and take part in carried by your blood? Whether it's too much fat in your diet or whether it's nicotine that you breathe in, isn't everything carried? Isn't everything you have an appetite for carried by your blood? Soul self means an appetite, a soul, a living, breathing creature. So everything that you have an appetite for is carried by your blood. Fascinating. A couple more minutes here. Genesis chapter 23, verse 8. Abraham talking about, and in the NES it says, your wish for me to bury my wife here is a good thing. It's literally your soul for me to bury my wife. Well, why did they translate it wish in the NASB? Well, because they're trying to convey emotions. And our emotions are carried by our soul. They're expressed through our soul. Exodus chapter 21, verse 23, the Lord's saying, look, if you take a life, you're going to pay with a life for a life. It's interesting, the words, again, are literally a soul for a soul. A soul for a soul. Again, the number is 53:15. Leviticus chapter 5, verse 1, if a soul sin, and then it talks about redeeming for that soul. It isn't saying if a spirit sin, it's saying if a soul sin. Now it's interesting, what it's talking about is, it's talking about the person, if the person sins. The soul is the soul self, it is self. if you decide to sin, what you will do to pay for that sin. But I think it's fascinating that it points it out that if a soul sin, it's not saying if a spirit sin. It's not using 7307 or ruka, which is your mind. It's talking about your soul, the personality, the appetite, what the person is partaking of. I'm going to end with this one. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 43. You shall not make yourselves abominable before the Lord. The word yourselves is literally 53:15, your soul. You shall not make your soul abominable before the Lord. How? By sin. Partaking of sin, we make our soul abominable before the Lord so that the Lord separates more and more and more from us. So we know that a whole country that opens up to sin and opens up to wickedness, the Spirit of the Lord leaves more and more and more till finally the angels themselves leave. And all that's left is a vacuum that Satan and his angels fill up. That's why in Babylon, Michael had to come and fight for Gabriel so that Gabriel could get through a horde of demon spirits to get to Daniel. Why? Because Babylon was into pagan idol worship so much that they opened up to the devil so that the Spirit of the Lord departed. And the only hope and help for the righteous was the Lord held the enemy at bay with certain mighty ones that would not let the enemy destroy them. So if we make ourselves abominable before the Lord, our souls abominable, the Spirit of God moves further and further and further away from us. Well, something's going to fill that vacuum. The devil always comes in to fill that vacuum. There is no middle ground. Isn't that amazing? People think there's a middle ground. Oh, I want to live 1 foot in the church and 1 foot in the world. Sorry, that's lukewarm. That'll get you left behind at the rapture. That'll get you left behind. But if you reject the Lord and just want to live for the world, and the deeper you go in the world, the more and more abominable you become. And the more the Spirit of God separates from you. And it gets darker and darker at your house. I'll end with this. C.S. Lewis had a fascinating short story. If you ever get to read it, it's a wonderful one. It's called A Bus Ride to Heaven. A Bus Ride to Heaven. But he also talks about the people are coming from hell. They're coming from hell. He had some revelations. Anyway, he talked about hell, and he talked about how the further into hell you go, the darker it gets. And the rainier it gets. He didn't see a place of liquid rock and fire. He saw a place of dreariness and cold and rain. And darkness, dreariness. And the more wicked you were, the darker and more dreary it is. And that's really not a bad picture. That's really not a bad picture. If your soul becomes abominable before the Lord, he leaves. He leaves. And nature hates a void, a vacuum. Something always comes in and fills it. And it won't be angels. It'll be demons. So turn from the wicked, run to the light, and you'll be running into the arms of Jesus. Lord bless you till we come together.